Last time on the 71 Cutlass restoration, we got all of the front suspension and the steering box squared away. Now it's time to turn our attention to this rear axle. This is the original rear axle that came underneath the Cutlass. So first things first, I had to drive out these old bushings. Now we are just mocking up this rear end right now. So eventually we are going to rebuild this when we put the car back together for final assembly. After the old bushings were out, I decided to open up the rear end just because we wanted to see what condition the internals of this rear end were in. I removed the 10 bolts on the diff cover. Next, I drained all of the fluid because we are going to be rebuilding this and replacing all the fluid at one point in time. Once all of the fluid was drained, I could check all of the internals and everything looked great. All of the gears looked great. There wasn't any play and everything spun smoothly, which is what you want. So now I'm reinstalling that diff cover just because this is for mock-up right now and I don't want all of the dust from the sanding to get inside the rear end. So now rotating the rear end over, the next issue was these spring mounts right here. So there are one on each side and I actually have to cut them off because we're running 2A1 coilovers on this. So this really wasn't too hard. The only thing that you have to be careful with is you do not want to cut into your axle tubes. So just make sure you cut on the outside and then you're able to grind off all of that excess later. I got the majority of them cut out of the way and then I just used my hammer and beat the rest of it off. After that, I grabbed my grinder. That way I could smooth down all of the rest of the metal that was left in those brackets. So the last thing I have to do before I get the rear end underneath the car are actually drill all of the holes for these coilover brackets, which come with all of the 2A1 kit. So I just have to drill 3 holes on each of the lower 4-link mounts. Once those are drilled, it's time to install the coilover brackets. These coilover brackets are actually pretty nifty. They're just a couple pieces of metal that all bolt together. Like that, the rear end is ready to go underneath the car. So I slid it under on my jack, and then all I had to do was just connect all of the linkage to the rear end and then throw the rear tires on.